Hi, everyone, and welcome to Poets in Conversation. I'm Phyllis Klein, and tonight we have Diane Frank and Mary Kay Rummel, poets of great beauty inside, outside, and on the page, who are also friends with deep poetry connections and builders of poetic community. Mary Kay was the first poet laureate of Ventura County. Diane is the editor-in-chief of Blue Light Press, publishing many books every year and offering in-depth crafting workshops online. Mary Kay's poetry is described as psalm-like, hymnal music, illuminating, taking us on a pilgrimage. And those are all quotes from the back cover of her book. Her poetry is filled with colors and visions, travel and memory. Now, the poet George Wallace says about Diane's poetry, it's poetry of love, returning to love, and light returning to light. And it's a heart gone supernova. I think you'll agree with that when we hear it. We could say about both of them that their radiant poetry takes us earthbound creatures somewhere up above to find simultaneous escape and renewal. I am so thrilled to welcome this beauty and transcendence into our evening with the chance to hear and dig into these masterful poets' work. And welcome to our wonderful audience as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about the poems that I'm going to read tonight. I'm going to start with a poem and end us with a poem as well. And both of these poems are going to be coming out in an online journal called The Bloom, which is edited by Georgina Marie, who is somebody I met at the Mendocino Writers Conference. That was before the pandemic. And she's the current poet laureate of Lake County. For anybody who may know her. This first poem, I started it with a prompt I lead a poetry therapy group that I've been doing for many, many years. And this came from a Rilke quote that we were talking about in that workshop. And it was Rilke's invocation to understand why we write. And it came from letters to a young poet. So here's the poem. Because I am a wave attached to an ocean. And the epigraph is, find out the reason that commands you to write. See whether it has spread its roots into the very depth of your heart. Confess to yourself you would have to die if you were forbidden to write. To remind myself why I write, I remember the golden eagle I saw in an oak tree watching me. I remember the rattlesnake coiled around a fence, rattling. A fox so close on the trail I could almost reach out to stroke its coat of reddish fur that swirled in the shade trees. It was near a lake with an abundance of skate ray fish flapping their wings at the water's surface. Because there is nothing else to do about loveliness than to bow down and worship it. Because I am a hose attached to a spigot of images, dying to explain why there is so much suffering in a world that offers us this much beauty. To remind myself why I write, I imagine how a heart dishes out its love to swim in a lake with skate ray fish and their wings. How my heart could be out there in the water and also inside my chest. My heart, queen of the pond. Well, really, I'm at my desk pressing keys with white letters on dark gray background because I am a waterfall attached to a river of spirits calling my name, Phyllis. Or maybe it's Rilke with his advice. Maybe it's the fox who stood still as a photograph in his foxy fur coat and whispered without words, "Phyllis, write," and didn't say why, but a door opened and I walked through. Thank you. So now I'm going to introduce Diane. It's my great pleasure to introduce Diane Frank. Excuse me. She is the author of 8 books of poems, 3 novels, and a photo memoir of her 400-mile trek in the Nepal Himalayas. Her book, While Listening to the Enigma Variations, New and Selected Poems, published by Glass Lyre Press, is winner of the 2022 Next Generation Indie Book Award for Poetry. And there she's holding it up. She is editor of 2 best-selling anthologies, Fog and Light, San Francisco Through the Eyes of the Poets Who Live Here, and I'm in there, of course, thank you, and Pandemic Puzzle Poems. Diane lives in San Francisco, where she dances, plays cello in the Golden Gate Symphony, and creates her life as an art form. I'll say. Blackberries in the Dream House, her first novel, won the Chelson Award for Fiction and was nominated for the Pulitzer. So, Diane, let's hear from you.
Thank you, Phyllis, for inviting us here. Thank you, David. And I really want to thank everyone who is here and came to listen. It means a lot to me. I see many of my friends. I see many new people that I hope to meet one day in person or on the screen when you're reading. My first poem is The Genie. I feel that every day we have decisions about how we're going to face the world. This poem is written from the point of view of the genie inside Aladdin's lamp. The genie. The dancing girl in the yellow silk pants shimmered in my dream. She was the flame that kept burning in the morning. If I bring her to Aladdin, I can gaze into her chocolate eyes and lose myself in the maze of her footsteps. Aladdin thinks I am his servant, but every morning I weave a dream into the world where he walks by the river. I hold my prism in the river of sunlight, each wave a color of possibility to weave footsteps into the world. I paint every morning. I can dream or disappear into the longing for the light that becomes invisible inside the bronze of my lamp. Every morning, you choose to dance or disappear. My next poem is Magnificat for J.S. Bach. I'm a cellist along with being a poet, and this poem was written on J.S. Bach's birthday at a 20-hour marathon at Syracuse University to celebrate his music when I was a student. Magnificat. It was the old man's 285th birthday, and I mean the maestro, the Illuminata, Johann Sebastian Bach. I was a university student, and to celebrate 3 centuries of musical genius, our conductor led a 20-hour marathon concert starting early in the morning. All day, musicians and students migrated in and out of the auditorium with motets, cantatas, and concertos. A barefooted organist played the toccata and fugue in D minor, then a prelude entirely with his feet. I was amazed at the synergy of dance and sound. Our concertmaster dazzled us by playing the 6th Bach cello suite arranged for violin with his eyes closed. No music stand as he tuned to an inner singing. segue to the entire orchestra walking on stage to play the second Brandenburg Concerto, the Concerto for 2 harpsichords, the Concerto for 3 harpsichords, and later, just after sunset, the Magnificat. I was playing cello next to the harpsichord inside the sway of its musical body, surrounded by tones that took me back to an earlier century. That night, I had my first experience of musical transcendence. The moon was glowing through stained glass. On stage, we were playing the Magnificat. Inside, we were flying in otherworldly ecstasy. By 10 o'clock that night, I could swear the maestro was there, listening and sometimes playing with us. Years later, on the other side of the continent, one of my private pleasures is playing the Bach cello suites late at night with no one listening. And sometimes by the ocean with the moon glowing toward full, the old man whispers to me, I'm going to read another Syracuse University poem. This is about what it was like to be 19 years old, and it's called Thorndon Park. And a little homage to Neruda's Green poem. In memory, everything is green. Aurora glowing in the sky over a mountain, green light filling a room, tropical leaves in the greenhouse, green love, a green hill, sliding with friends on cafeteria trays down a path of snow. We were green in our knowledge of the world, on our backs in the amphitheater, under a sky show of stars. Through a telescope from an attic window, my first view of the rings of Saturn. In a blizzard during a snowstorm, my first ride in a snow mover with giant wheels. In the stacks of the university library, I was always searching for poets with women's names: Diane de Prima, Adrienne Rich, Denise Levertov. In the house on the other side of Thorndon Park, he dreamed of intricate interweaving harmonies. I dreamed about my father. Music in moonlight through a stained glass window. Later, I watched an artist friend sew legs on the bottom of a painting of 2 women when she ran out of canvas. The women leaned into the colors the sky turns before the light disappears. Everything on an impulse. Jump into the green VW Bug, drive to Niagara Falls at night to see the moonbow on tumbling water, a shimmering silver white arc. In April, drive to Key West during spring vacation, sleep on the beach with the salty blue ocean crashing into our dreams. Everyone too absorbed in self-discovery to understand the ocean of tears that fell out of what they touched and let go of. Climbing ladders and scaffolds of buildings under construction. We were under construction. Yes, our lives were like that, green in those days. My next poem today, reading for all of the victims of mass shootings. It's really, really different when you know someone who was shot. During the shooting of the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, I lost a very close friend from high school. I was devastated. I woke up with this poem 4 days after the shooting. Tree of Life, Kaddish for Dr. Jerry Rabinowitz. It's a form of praying, to hold the darkness inside yourself and embrace it the way you would hold water in a flowing river. To wake up with tears flowing from a dream, your face a field of milkweed as the pods scatter in a wind of prayer, embracing the growing cold. I remember where he sat by the window at the bottom of the floodplain, where the rivers emptied into the streets that afternoon, fire trucks creating a wake as they moved through the water. And when the bullets came, he ran toward the shattering souls, following his instincts, always to help, to heal the wounded and the dying. His friends hold each other, reaching out through time and a dark river, holding seeds planted long ago by the tree of life, say Kaddish in front of an open ark of the covenant. He would want you to find your light and embrace it again, to walk back into the forest we call the world. Hold his memory the way you would hold his face. Let his voice ripple through time. Where the trunk of a redwood tree, thick with the rings of centuries, was burned by lightning, shine your light into the dark world. I always like to read something gentle after this. For those of you who are in the Bay Area, we'll be performing an orchestral piece based on this poem at the Herbst Theater the first Sunday in June. So you can write to me and I'll send you details and get you on the invite list. The poem begins with me on the podium with the conductor. I read the poem and then I walk to the cello section to play. My eyes are never dry. My next poem, somewhere in Tibet or in my mind. In Tibet, Nepal, and the Himalayas, all of the mountains are worshipped as goddesses. Late at night, I think about atoms and stars, layers of infinity, reaching out to the far expanse of the universe where there is no edge, reaching in to the core of atoms, layer after layer of particles, energy, light. There is something even beyond this, which I can feel, but don't completely understand. Somewhere on a mountain in India or Tibet, a monk is chanting sutras and carving mani stones. He sees what I see as a goddess with 1,000 arms, and the mountain whispers her name. I'm going to read a new poem. This is an early pandemic poem. I used the pandemic as a writing retreat. So these are 5 images, memories, fantasies, things that happened early in the pandemic. The quiet time. 1, hidden. On nights like this, I have nothing to offer anybody except a jar full of fireflies. In a field of memory, we are watching meteor showers. That was the night our dreams began to fly to the stars on Orion's belt. The truck was filled with hay. We were singing with the aurora streaming across the sky. One day I will find the right words, and the visions we have held for so long will leap into the sky. 2, golden koi. On a tropical island, an angel skin coral grotto dreamed of golden fish. Around a star in the Andromeda galaxy, a blue planet was born. In the water of a golden sea, A blue frog leaped out of the waves. A comet carried messages to a new constellation, crossing eons of time along the trajectories of asteroids. Centuries later, my dreams, like golden koi made of starlight, started leaping to a new world. 3, wind dance. She danced with her reflection in the window, her friends in little boxes. One woman danced with a teddy bear, another with a broom. The music flew through a wind tunnel. The harmonies, like a flock of birds, fluttered against each other. That night, in a dream, we waltzed on a polished floor, thigh to thigh, with pivot turns at the end of every phrase. 4, Niagara sunset. The sunset tonight is like Niagara Falls, a memory of the northern sky. The river cascading over bedrock, and underwater, many miracles. Years ago, we walked into a cave under a waterfall, stalactites dripping from the walls, reflecting lantern light. You were a prince, I was an ingenue. Somewhere, a starfish is dreaming, turquoise in salt water, banded fish, a meteor, a heart insisting on staying open to the beauty in the world. 5, the embryo begins to dream. On the other side of a thick cloud, an embryo begins to dream. I wrote down everything on the inner walls of stones, a vision in the distance between spinning stars. The universe was a labyrinth, a symphony, an enigma. On a love night, inside a nest of gumwood trees, 2 cells dance, swim, and unite. Above them, stars tumble into the future. Before sunrise, you can hear music inside a wild orchid as it is opening. I have another new poem I'd like to share. I think it's on the other side of the room. I'll get it.
Wow. What images, goodness.
It has disappeared. Oh, okay. It's one of the nice things about doing a poetry reading in your own house. Everything's here. I have friends here who are dealing with a lot of snow right now. So this is a poem called Midnight on the Town Square. It was inspired by Marion Post Walcott's Snowy Night. You can look up the photograph on the internet. And the photograph reminded me of the town square in Fairfield, Iowa, where I used to live. Midnight on the town square. A whisper can start a rumor. You can look at a diamond ring in the window of the jewelry shop and half the town will wonder. They were dancing in a narrow room under the bookstore. They spoke different languages, but the body provides a thin line of translation. The snow drifted and fell again around the street lamps where they walked inside an echo. Unspoken desires swirled under the light. A snowdrift by the penny parking meter became suspended in time. The coins echoed in his memory. The thin branches of trees were shivering like her arms. She almost remembers the sound of his voice and the way he held her, how she watched him lift the shawl away from her shoulders in the moonlight through her window. She can still hear a train echoing in the distance, the touch of his fingertips, the silk of her quilt before they entered a dream. In a silver frame by her window, you enter the photograph, full of shiver and heat, snow falling softly in an aura of light around a row of street lamps. And I'm going to end with a short poem, a love poem I wrote for my husband before I met him. Iowa Omen. 3 hawks fly south as your voice trembles across the Great Plains. Fields of sleeping cows, a gentleness in the land. Here is the omen, sky splashed with aurora, blue stars, curtains of light. The letters are gold on red silk, Japanese calligraphy. If I had the right kind of ink, I'd write them on your skin.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Diane. That was beautiful is the first word that comes to mind. Really, really gorgeous. And I was thinking about the supernova of love. And I think you've shown us that for sure. So Mary Kay, why don't we have you come and join us?
Okay.
And and we'll spend a little time with Diane talking about her reading. So you read 2 new poems, is that right, Diane?
I did.
And that one it's kind of like a prayer. It has the feeling it's all the dancing and the orchids opening and the pivot turns at the end of every phrase is what Pat said about it. What was that like to write that one?
Ecstatic, blissful. It was very early in the pandemic. I didn't have access to a lot of things I would have in normal times. I play in the Golden Gate Symphony, as you mentioned. Our orchestra shut down early in March. It shut down. We were 3 weeks before performing Mahler Symphony 1, which we performed in the fall. I dance a lot. There was no dancing. I usher for the San Francisco Symphony. There was no ushering. So like you could either get really depressed early in the pandemic or find your way to keep the light shining. So these were just moments. Some of them were memories. That one night, the dance community was having they had dance musicians perform every Saturday night in the North Bay on Zoom, and people would just dance in their little boxes. And then like the 4th one, Catherine Hastings was posting photographs of ice on the Niagara River, and Niagara Falls is a place of very special memories for me. So it triggered that poem. And then the whole thing about the embryo, and the 2 cells uniting and starting to swim. I'm almost done, actually. I have a new novel coming out in the fall. It's about mermaids and musicians. I started writing it a month before Eric and I got married. It was really a crazy time. And I was saying to Eric one night, just before bed, I'm not sure if I'm going to write another novel, because I had hired a publicist. It didn't work out. And here I was 1 month before my wedding having to be my own publicist and do a book launch, which is exactly what I didn't want to do. So I said that to Eric, and I turned the light out. And then, the mysterious place where writing comes from started to speak to me. And I said, Eric, I need to write something down. So I turned the light on, and it was like the first couple of paragraphs of my new novel were dictated to me. And then
Wow.
2 months after the wedding. It was actually my first time away from my husband after we were married. I spent a week with KB Ballantyne and her husband. So I was just like, and on Signal Mountain, Tennessee, and I just knew that that's where the novel had to start. I fell in love with the mountain. I always loved spending time with KB. I was watching the birds outside her window. And in my book, there's a birth on the mountain. So it was kind of like the novel and the poem were in conversation. And I think that in all of my books, my novels, they're always in conversation with my poems. So it's
Mhm,
just like, let's keep the light shining, let's keep enjoying life. This is not
mhm.
the worst thing that has ever happened to humanity. It's not the worst thing that ever happened to me, so let's find a way to be positive.
Yeah, that's what it seems to me, that's what your poetry is doing for all of us, is bringing in the light and keeping the light shining. And I know, Mary Kay, I think you're really on that same path. That's why it's so beautiful to have both of you here together.
Well, I love luminosity is the word I think of with Diane's
Mhm,
poems all the time, and
mhm.
certainly the ones you read today. And yeah, I love that the images in that the early pandemic poem. I mean,
Mhm.
it did seem, thinking about it, like um, that's amazing that could come out of that, those images. And I love the frogs, the gold,
Mhm.
the frogs in the gold.
And
Yeah.
they all came out of the magic place. The time I
Mm,
really had trouble keeping my light shining was after my friend was shot, and
right.
he would come up to me, and he would come to me in dreams. I'd have conversations with him just like I'm having with you right now, and he would just say, "Okay, keep your light shining, walk back into the world."
Wow.
And I think he helped heal the people that were grieving him. He was a physician. He was the physician that
Mm,
ran towards the bullets instead of, he wasn't in the
right,
sanctuary when the
right.
shooting started, but he hoped he could save someone and lost his life in the process.
Mm,
It's crazy country, crazy times right now.
right, right, right,
And
right.
I think that you have a line in there that really, the one about um, that it being a firmer praying is holding the dark inside yourself, which
Mhm.
that's part of it too. Part of the, I mean, I think that's really important, because when things like that, things that happen all the time, it's not like a question of letting them all go. It's,
Mm,
to 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 also stay in the light, it's a question of how you do that. And
mm.
I think you do that through writing and music.
Yeah. And I would say also generosity. I think both of you are most generous, and in your community building, I think, as we can see by all the people that are here, on a Saturday late afternoon, early evening, or whatever time it is, where you are, because of this, the community and the spirit that you bring together. Um, so uh, so let's see. I think maybe let me introduce Mary Kay, and then we'll come back for more with both of you. Um, so Mary Kay, welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Mary Kay Rummel's ninth poetry book, Nocturnes, Between Flesh and Stone, has been recently published by Blue Light Press of San Francisco. Her first book, This Body She's Entered, won a Minnesota Voices Award from the New Rivers Press. The Lifetime Trembles won the Blue Light Award from the Blue Light Press, and Love in the End was a chapbook award winner from Bright Hill Press. Mary Kay is co-editor of Psalms of Cinder and Silt, Cinder and Silt, poems about experiences with fires in California. That's from Solo Nova Press. And she has read her poems in many venues in the US, England, and Ireland. She loves sitting in a Galway pub, listening to Irish fiddlers, and studying the Book of Kells in Dublin. She is Poet Laureate Emerita of Ventura County, a founding member of the Ventura County Poetry Project, and divides her time between Minneapolis and Ventura. And let's note that she's in Ventura right now. So
Thank goodness.
yes,
It's really,
really,
in
given the
Minneapolis,
weather,
I know.
given the weather in Minnesota, yeah.
Yeah, right.
So welcome, Mary Kay, and can't wait to hear from you.
Thank you, Phyllis and Diane. And thank you for everybody who came. It's so great. The hard thing about Zoom, the thing I find hard, is like I want to just sit and talk to talk to people. It's like I see people that I haven't seen, and I think, oh, I wish I could just ask that and that, but you can't really, because it's, it's personal and so, but thank you for coming. It's really nice to see you out there. And I'm really, I love her, honored to be with Phyllis. She has a wonderful book called The Full Moon Herald that I would suggest because it's based, it's set up like a newspaper, and it's based on the things that happen, and all poems, and they're just beautiful. Yes, so show them your book, because it's I love the way it's organized into the different sections of the paper and how it pulls in all the things that happen. So it's good, and I love reading with Diane. It's great. I've been, when I first started going back and forth between, I came out to California to teach. That's how I got out here, and I liked it a lot, and I stayed. And of course I have grandkids in LA and stuff. And so, but I was going back and forth. And so I was feeling a kind of loose, because I have a long-term poetry group in Minneapolis, in St. Paul. And I hadn't really met poets here. I had just started to, in Ventura's, this area is so generous in terms of the poets. They were so welcoming. But anyway, in sort of the beginning of that stage of my life, that's where I ran across Diane. And it was like, I saw, I thought, oh, online workshop, that'd be perfect for me, because I could do it wherever I was. Because, when I was going back a lot and coming here. And so that's how I started. And I think that was like, I think it's 2008. So it's been a long time. It's been a long time that I've been working with Diane, and I really love her workshop, and we are on the same sort of poetic, world. So it's, I appreciate it, and I appreciate all her help over the years. So with that, I'm going to read some poems from a few poems from my Nocturnes book, which is right here. Oh, you see, Phyllis is holding it up. And then I'm going to read one new poem. And I'm just going to say that for me, poetry is really, it's finding, which I think poetry is, it's finding things. It's finding and seeing. It's a way of seeing into the layers between past and present, and in particular. And so I'm going to say that's my theme, sort of beneath the layers. And I'm going to start with a poem and end with a poem about nature, based on nature. And so it was for this case, it's the past lives of nature that have gone and are going, vanishing. We live by the mercy of things no longer with us. Redwings in their swale of reeds the waterfall grown small, creeping its way up the rock face. Wild ranging roses hidden in bogs, pollen laid by for eternity. Weed in the haze and the heat on its way down the rootstock. The ponderous winds move slowly and sullenly, the stuff of dreams, while the earth crackles like peeling canvas, and everything a human being is made of sifts in the air. Dove blue plums blown to feather particles, gray-white bindweed crumbles beneath clay, where monarch, starling, and lark are lost for all time. What will we be when the glaciers are gone? Flood echo and fire silence. Let us see with a kind of open, wide grief. After images shaped the wind, that disappeared, where they were born and died, shining all around us, the way burned out starlight shows for a time in the eyes of the living. And then there's the past history. One of Diane's poems talked about searching for women, the women writers in the library. And I certainly had that experience. I'm sure, you know, all the women here have that experience in searching for women painters and women in history. And so the sort of the inspiration for this book was a woman, an illuminator. I love illuminations, and I love medieval history and cathedrals. And anyway, she was an illuminator, and her body was found in northern Germany, and she was an 11th century nun. And when this woman archaeologist found her body, there were in her teeth little blue specks. And that was the first time there'd been any proof. This was just a couple of years ago. The first time there'd been any proof that women were actually scribes in the Middle Ages and made those books. And so this poem is about that. Illuminator dreams. An 11th century nun in northern Germany, scribe and painter. She copies the gospel in a tower among oak branches. She dreams of light falling across the page, shining through the leaves, drawing her in, and she writes a story beneath the story. Painting her dream light, she learns underneath is more, too much light to see in the margins of the world. With a hard tip brush, she dips into ultramarine, made from crushed lapis lazuli, paints on calf skin, rests with a tiny brush in her mouth, wets it, readying herself to paint Mary's blue gown. Her painting like the scribble of rain on the lake's wide page, breaking off light, breaking off when the light moves on. She follows deeper, weary, inside the womb of rock, of rain. She dreams of lapis stones carried from Afghanistan by merchants along that great Silk Road, stones worth more than gold. Once she sat in sunlight near a waterfall, and once she sang near the Southern Sea. This is her story now, and the light is hers forever. In 1,000 years, another woman will find flecks of lapis in the nun's stone teeth, nested like tiny blue robin eggs. So another inspiration for my book, and an inspiration in general, was hearing Joshua Bell play a transcription of Chopin, Nocturne No. 2. And so I have a poem called Nocturnes, which led to the title of my book. And it's the layers of the past and the present, and in this case, you know, the historical past and the personal. Nocturnes. Joshua Bell plays his transcription of Chopin Nocturne number 2, Opus 9. His violin carries me to Paris, where I walk alone in twilight shimmer as street lamps, bridges shine with rain, fog rising from the Seine. The past is a stone in my hand. I finger it as evening deepens, plant myself on Pont de la Tournelle, watch the back of Notre Dame as the sky shifts through layers of blue. Darkness shrouds the cathedral. Even after the great fire, the flat, dark skeletons of its buttresses fly, softened by leafing plane trees. I'm not alone here. On the bank of the bridge, Saint Geneviève lays her hands on the shoulders of a child, a young Paris, city she once protected from the Huns. We're not strangers. At 18, I was given her name, aching to become a holy Sister Genevieve. I, who never left St. Paul, prayed to the protector of Paris, begging her to guide me on sleepless convent nights. She looks through 16 centuries, down on me again, no longer laboring to be holy. Joshua Bell's violin distills blue from Chopin's notes for piano. Dusk gathers the smells of centuries, a surge of strings against the night. Past, present, future, one smooth stone. And that's another reason I love Diane's poems, is all the music. So this is another, I saw a stone statue in Ankara, Turkey, at the Museum of Anatolian Civilizations. And it was a statue of the Mother Goddess from 5750 BC. And from a town nearby, actually, where they're still digging. And this again, I started with the Mother Goddess and just describing this statue and my response to it, and then took me to my own history, which I think is poetry is a way to do that. Finding her, Mother Goddess on her throne, 5750 BC. No more than terracotta, warmed earth smell, her thick body on a little clay throne, breasts like large loaves, buttocks like melons. She's flanked on each side by sacred lion animals. Her hands, their heads, a melting of woman and beast. Her belly protrudes and softens. A child's head emerges from between her thighs. Paleolithic Mother Goddess, thunder heart of the land of us all. Before Aphrodite, older than Artemis, her face lifts as she listens to her own music. Hair piled on her head, small nose, enduring mouth, shored up against ruin, against history. She is for walking toward, through sage, heat, locusts, war. Her gravity reminds me of my great-grandmother, Joanna, in an old portrait, black Irish hair coiled, wine dark sea eyes, body conformed to a hive. Found whole, surrounded by ancient fragments of a puzzle, humming an ancient note. Listen, they say, do you want to hear all the women resting inside us in dirt, rock, chant, dark? I have traveled so far to find her memory. Thank you. Phyllis had marked one of this poem as one suggestion to read, and it's about a male inspiration, a male poet, Jack Gilbert, who died a couple of years ago. And I noticed Phyllis has got some quotes from him in her book, and I was lucky toward the end of his life to actually work with him at Vermont Studio Center, and heard him read in a small church in Johnson, Vermont, little white church with the steeple. And so this poem is my response to that. And I think to his reading, and a lot of my poems are responses to one thing or another like this. Jack Gilbert at Vermont Studio Center. And there's a quote in the poem from his poem, We Are the Junction. This poet is frail, shaking as he climbs wooden steps to the stage. Singer of the spirit body. Here's the quote. The mind touches the heart and is music. When body touches heart, they together are the moon in the silently falling snow. Opening chasms of longing and desire, water on stone, shining with an inner light as he speaks. Once a perfect New England church, this seems made for his shaman presence, a bell for light. In the hush after he falls silent, I want to run to merge with mud and rush of the river. And yeah, there was absolute silence for the longest time when he finished his poems, which just people couldn't talk. They were so blown away by this frail man reading these incredibly vital and virile poems. It's just and it was just amazing. So I've always remembered it. All right, I think I'll read this one too, just because last summer I was in Diane's workshop. This is a new poem, and we worked on short forms, well, on haiku, tanka, and haibun. And it was so much fun. I really loved it. And I wrote this haibun, and what I'm finding with the haibun, which is a combination of prose and then a short poem at the end, is that it makes me, it's just a way to deal with memory in lots of ways, experiences from memory, because you can put lots of details in the prose part and then think of the poetry for the end. So this is called Bridges. And this one takes place in Bangkok, in Thailand. Bridges. Neng, our friend in Bangkok, had been up all last night carving colored soaps into petaled flowers for us. Tonight on the riverboat, she orders the rainy season foods she loves. We swallow luminous lychees, eat fish, baked whole, scoop it from the bones. The Chao Phraya River reflects spires of golden watts and skyscrapers, tiny houses almost tumbling into the water. Night hides dark apartments with kitchens hanging off the back. From the shore drift smells of jasmine, garbage, while we selling past long sail boats, dark ferries, rice barges, and couples who ply the river selling fresh crabs and fish to boaters. Around us, singing ties. When we pass under bridges, the young men cheer the way our children did when we drove under bridges. And before that, the way my brothers and I yelled from the back seat of my father's black Chevrolet, honked the horn, our hands raised to hold up every wooden railroad trestle in St. Paul. The shouts, a memory bridge from there to here. In Bangkok, I saw a man ride an elephant against traffic on the expressway beneath a wooden railroad bridge. All of us hanging on from here to there. So thanks, Diane. That was a fun workshop, and which I'm still playing with. A theme in my book was the color blue, which is a thread that I just worked with and kind of wove into a lot of poems. This poem is called Finding Blue, and it's based on, inspired by a quote by Vincent van Gogh, I look for blue, simple. I am trying to live each day as if it were the first, an eve waking and naming, sun a surprise, wing a flash. Along the pond, just emerged indigo dragonflies, loop and whir, mad with sex, and the ending of their 2-week adult lives. I read that early humans did not name blue. Did they see it? What did Eve call sky? I like to think 2,000 years ago, a woman swerved off her path to kneel before a blossom, its color a flutter of sky. She suddenly named blue, laughing, bringing others to see. Now ultramarine and indigo everywhere, feathers of hunting jays, the blue fire of the Côte d'Azur in summer, braid and feathers of 4 wild turkeys on the roof edge, the youngest afraid to fly. Flight lessons for young mallards, almost but not quite lifting off, cobalt flashing from their tails. Cattails, spear in electric sky, where heron drops to the green swaddle of the pond. Blue as storm, iridescent, alive, to the rings on the surface where turtle rises. Dragonfly blue rushes through a quick and private joy. So I'm going to end with, I have 2 poems to read. One is an exploration of the color blue that kind of covers a lot of my poems. And it even the nun with the blue in the teeth comes back in it. And then I'm going to end with another poem. Well, you see, a natural world poem. Bluing. This is the first poem. Bluing. The blue eye charms in every Turkish market to ward off evil. The same periwinkle on doors in every hill village in Portugal. Blue squeezed from leaves of the yellow flowering woad plant. The same woad blue the Picts used to paint their bodies. Like the blue nude by Matisse, in the bodies of Cézanne's bathers, blue blotched the way the sky is cloud blotched. Lapis lazuli, original blue mined from earth in Afghanistan, ground to aquamarine of illuminations found in the teeth of a medieval female scribe, ground to paint the Virgin's gown in centuries of annunciations. And here's one of them, the Annunciations, one of the earliest. Fra Angelico's blue of Mary's gown, sky flowing. The angel, all tenderness, longing reigns over his ambiguous face, her whole body a question, all tilt, all eyes frightened, forgotten book dropped in her lap. Once a blue fog rose on the lake, revealing a fishing boat. I heard the whine of its motor before I saw my children wave their small arms, turning wings loved by azure wind, bringing them home to me. Earth gave us blue, cobalt above and within all things. In my mind, the hands and arms that hold me wear the pregnant blue of the sea before sunset. For a moment, sky and earth, the same aquamarine. We are blue smoke, mineral, either temporary against eternal hills. Blue veined sky breathes birds in and out of the light, their breasts glowing sapphires. At closing time, when the guard comes into the empty Prado Museum, I'm still leaning into that impossible blue of the Virgin, into that deepening sky. Okay, my blue in my life. And then the last poem is 80 Autumn Moons. This is a new poem. Phyllis asked me to read this. It ends with the words, "Have you said enough?" which I thought is a good ending for a poetry reading. 80 Autumn Moons. Geese cross the eye the moment when leaving finds its wings. In silt, in shadow, you will speak with pine boughs, softer than any syllables. Seed heads of goldenrod, soft as rabbit fur, but underneath stiff as bone. A bloom of dust passing through time to write your name. Clouds set down their crows beside water, waiting as if there's something more to do. At dusk, the great blue heron claims a pond rimmed in burning embers of maple leaves. You write all those small or immense things that burn so brightly in your heart, turn to drops, motes of darkness falling slowly, covering the ground. You write what you can. The vision is always present, but you are not. Try to find your shadow among the shadows. Slow the dying cricket nocturne. Hear voices sing back to you, egret angels and golden grass, what you have come for. 80 autumn moons, and have you said enough? Listen to what pine and cedar say when no wind stirs. That's the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mary Kay. Egret angels and golden grass. Yeah, I don't think you said enough. We want you to keep going. Yeah, so thank you again for the reading. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Yeah, and let's get some comments. I know there's some comments in the chat, but if anybody wants to say something, we'd love to hear from you. The time has come. So I know we've kept you quiet, and now we'd love for you to speak if you'd
I
like.
see one comment in the chat from a friend of mine, Terry Shannon, said poets are modern day illuminators. And I thought, yeah, that's right.
Thanks for that, Terry. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
And Robin says, just beautiful, Mary Kay. Yeah, Diane. Hey, Diane.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to respond to these poems. I just love the way you read, and I love what you read today. You know, I've made major friend and fan. The whole thing, poetry is a way of seeing into the layers, your theme. That's so important. And I feel that poetry expresses what ordinary language can't express. I feel that the writing of poems is an altered state of consciousness. And I feel that when I hear your poems. And a couple of lines that came out to me: what will we be when the glaciers are gone? You know, it's like, it's something that we really need to think about, and something that I could think about for a long time. In your poem, Illuminator Dreams, it's really interesting. Blue Light Press has just published a book by Heather Estes, where she wrote about that same event of finding the blue in the teeth. Very different poems, but I love it in a writing workshop when themes converge and you find like 3 or even 5 poets writing about the same theme, which happens in groups that meet regularly. And love the tiny blue robin eggs at the end of your poem. I read poetry to discover images like this. It was just so spectacular. And your comment about layers of the past and the present, and then reading your poem about Joshua Bell. When you said his violin carries me to Paris. I know that Joshua would like this. If you hear him again, be sure to talk to him. He's very friendly. And I think the protector of Paris got you out of the convent, just my 2 cents. But anyhow.
Come to Paris.
And I love the goddess voice in your poems. When you said, I have traveled so far to find this memory, and the whole thing about Jack Gilbert shining with an inner light, just really gorgeous reading. So those are a few of the things I noted. I'll be thinking about this reading for the next week and longer.
Thank you for that, Diane. Beautiful comments. And so Perry says in the chat, Mary Kay, your poems are out of this world. I want to hear them all again. You have brought blue into a new realm. Yeah. Is that your favorite color, by the way?
Well, I think it has the most layers, the color with the most layers anyway.
Yeah, interesting. You mean like the most different shades, or what kind of layers do you mean?
Well, historical connections, historical layers. And, and I don't think I'm alone, because I noticed that there are a lot of people who write, poems about blue, or whole books, that I've seen. And in that one book of essays, Rebecca, I can't think of her last name right now, who did the distance of the distance of blue. And they're beautiful essays that look at blue in nature. And so, yeah, I think it's a real thing, that the layers in blue.
So let's see. So Lynn Barnes says, thanks to your poets, what a lovely gathering, such powerful poems from each of you. Claudia says, beautiful reading, terrific reading. From Sandy, Diane, and Mary. I'm filled up with your words. Pat says, I love the way these two imagistic poets meet and amplify each other's work. Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, it might be fun to see the 2 of you do a little writing just together, where you could, or do some kind of communication, like write back and forth, write, what's it called? Epistolary poems or letters back and forth?
Mary Kay and I write to each other all the time during the workshop. We visit each other when we can, not since the pandemic. And that's such a great idea, Phyllis. And I did want to mention about when she read her Haibun. We have a chapbook from the summer workshop. So if I'll post the link on my Facebook page tomorrow, but anybody who wants to get the link, it's not expensive, and a number of people that were here today and still are in the book. So.
Oh, great. Yeah. And you can put it in our chat here if you want.
I actually can't, because I have a different computer that I use for that.
Oh, okay. Sure. Okay. Was there something else coming up that you wanted to mention to Diane that you're doing? We were talking about it and I just can't recall exactly.
Well, the main thing I did was 2 days ago, I did a town hall with poets and writers, and there will be a recording of it. So if anybody talking about Blue Light Press, and so there will be, anybody wants it, send me an email. And KB has a raised hand.
Oh, thank you. I didn't notice that. Okay. Thank you, Diane, for that. Yeah. Please, KB.
I just want to thank you guys for coming together to do this. I love Diane's work. I love Mary Kay's work. I love both of you as people. And it's very difficult for me to sit here and listen to you guys read and not want to jump up and write something myself, because both of you just inspire me with your images and your language. And just, just wanted to know I'm very grateful to be part of your poetic family. And I'm glad to see all the people here tonight hearing your wonderful words. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, it really is very compelling. And, it makes me feel like getting involved too. It's just really, I love the way, Diane, when you send out an email, you always say you are warmly and joyfully invited. And that's kind of what it just feels so inviting. Yeah, so,
and
so,
I was thinking, we've been talking about imagery and images, and I think that's what kind of got me to investigate being in Blue Light Press workshop, because that is in the ad in Poets and Writers. That's what I read, that's the kind of poetry that Blue Light was interested in, and it was poems of the spirit and in imagery, and so I think that's evident in Diane's writing, and I think everybody in the workshop, but that's how we really learn to work with that more and more.
Yeah, it really comes across, Mary Kay, for sure. So is anybody else in our audience want to come forward and speak? Juan, yeah.
Yeah. Hi, thank you so much for that reading. That was wonderful. I just had questions for both authors, but the first one for Diane Frank. I wanted to know if you could speak a little bit about your relationship to cold and the aurora, or these colors, because I feel they just come up quite a bit, and also and your relationship for both relationship with structure.
Okay, so
How do
the
you
first thing you mentioned was my relationship with cold.
the cold
Yeah.
and
Okay, cold, colors, and structure.
right.
Okay, let me get that. Okay, so first of cold, I don't like to be cold. And it was like, if you're talking about Tree of Life, particular, Unbraid the Growing Cold, it was like that's just how it felt. I mean, because first I got the news that there was a shooting in a synagogue, which made me feel terrible, because it was sort of like couldn't the Holocaust be over in the 40s? And all of a sudden it's just, and as a Jewish person in the next generation after the Holocaust, there was this big debate and question, because we all grew up in the shadow of the Holocaust, and we all wondered whether being Jewish was going to be fatal for us. And Jerry was part of that discussion. He's a very close friend. He wasn't just somebody on the other side of the room. He was in my circle of friends. And so it's just, I guess, just you could feel cold about life when a friend of yours is shot. I mean, it's just the most terrible thing. And and I was kind of messed up for almost a year. My dentist is a Taoist philosopher, and he told me that my grief was actually affecting my teeth, and it was really cool. Here's this really busy man with a huge heart, and he just stopped for 20 minutes what he was doing and talked to me, and he looked at me and he said, "Your friend is still alive right here." And that was the beginning of my healing. It was very warm. I think we associate love with warmth, being uncomfortable, death with cold. And so that's the first question. Second question, my relationship with color. Colors are part of a mythology for me since I've been very young. Certain colors mean certain things. When I was 19 years old, I had a whole set of sealing wax, and I would seal a letter in the color of what everything meant. And if I use a color in a poem, it's not just something I pulled out of the air. It's something that's deeply significant to me. So that's, and then the third thing you asked about was structure. Okay, I write basically unrhymed poems. And that's really my joy. I like writing poems without forms, traditional forms, without structure, because you have to be organic about your form when you do that. And instead of getting a word that will rhyme, you have to get exactly the right word out of the whole language. You know, instead of having just a small little group that you can use to rhyme the line, it's a huge responsibility because you have to choose the word that's exactly right, which I think is part of the work of poetry. You want every poem to deliver, you want every line to deliver, you want every word to deliver. And and there are many techniques to structure a contemporary poem, but they're subtle. It's a lot of what I deal with in the workshop. For example, a poem could leap all over the place on the page, but have some unifying threads going through it. Or it could be that what's underneath the poem, the subtext, is what really unifies the poem. Because I'm very strongly influenced by Robert Bly. He was one of my important mentors, and the Spanish language leaping poets and surrealists. And a lot of times a poem will leap to an amazing place, but then underneath there's something that unifies it. So you really have to know everything about poetry to write a contemporary poem well.
Wow.
And I would love to have you in the workshop. I just love your ideas about poetry. I love the questions that you asked.
Yeah, Juan is really great. Yeah, great questions, Juan. And Mary Kay, I wonder if you want to answer those too.
Well, I think I'll start with the structure because I think about structure a lot, but I do think the structure comes out. It comes out of the discovery of the poem, and of the illumination that the poem is. And then, this sounds good, and it's not always easy but the structure comes from that, and so I think everything, the spirit of the poem is everything, and but then of course somebody has to be able to read it, and the structure then becomes part of the poem, and it comes from it. So I don't think too much about. I do work on things because imagery lends its own structure, and lines, the lines of imagery give shape to the poem. And I do try to work with repeating sounds because I like music. So I think about things like that, but not
Yeah, I was wondering if something I notice about my own writing is it's often kind of like I'm not really thinking about any of that. And I'll just write it if I can get into that place where I'm just letting it go. And then it sort of has its own structure that I never would have been able to think through if I had just really tried to get it. So I wonder if either one of you goes.
And I think too, for me, I often start to hear the sound of a poem before I write anything down. And so hearing that sound gives a structure then to it.
That's fascinating. And you're shaking your head too, Diane, yeah? if you're hearing it.
I wanted to mention something else just about sound too, because I was very deeply moved by your poem about Jack Gilbert and what you told me about the end of the reading, that nobody could speak. And with music, I wish more people would do that, because sometimes, you know, the orchestra finishes and before they're even done holding the last note, um, they're clapping, and it's like, no, music starts from silence, it returns to silence. And you know, and it just, I was very deeply moved to hear that the audience did that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
At the San Francisco Symphony a week ago, I was ushering, and the conductor, you know, he has his hands up until, you know, for the last note, and it's not over until he puts his hands down. And he kept his hands up for about 15 seconds before he lowered them. So
Yeah.
he insisted that the music return to silence. And you know, think about a line in a poem. It's a cadence of language. With silence on both sides. I wish more poets would be more conscious of the framing of their line breaks, and how that kind of, you start the cadence, you return the cadence, and it's really a magnificent thing. And as a musician, I have to pay attention to the music of the language. So a good line break really helps me. And when poets don't do line breaks well, people will not like their writing, but not know why.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. So let's see. So Anna says, thank you for a beautiful evening. My heart is full to overflowing. Also, admiration, appreciation, just grateful for the devotion of these two artists and their craft. Myrna says, this reading was truly enriching. I'm grateful to both of you. And Juan says, thank you so much. And I think, so somebody put in the chat about Diane's workshop. Oh no, the chapbook. So there's a question about getting more info about your workshops, Diane. And
I'm going to put my email in the chat. That would be the best way.
Yeah, so I just have so many different directions that we could go before we have to finish up. But I'm most interested in whether anybody else wants to ask a question or make a comment.
I just wanted to make a comment in relation, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I wanted to make a comment in relationship to what Diane was just saying about someone will put their hands up for 15 seconds and probably many of you have heard the story of Pablo Neruda. He would give a reading and especially that one about being quiet, you know, and what's going on in the world. He'd say, now we will all count to 12 and be quiet. And when he would finish a reading, he would start counting to 12 and very slowly walk off the stage. So there would not be an applause because he'd be off the stage by the time he got to 12, because he didn't want people applauding. He wanted them to be with the feeling of his words. Which I always thought that was wonderful.
Yes. Oh, and Perry, I hope you can stick around. I'm going to read a poem for you tonight.
Oh,
to
well,
end our reading. Yeah.
That's a lovely invitation.
Okay, good. Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else? That's such a beautiful comment about Neruda. One of my favorite poems of his too. Well, let's see. So if anybody else wants to speak, just raise your hand. And thanks so much, everybody, for doing that. It's been really helpful. So let's see. Oh my goodness. I have to think about, well, for one thing, I was thinking a lot about color, and you both read poems that had color, specifically had color in them. I guess Mary Kay, you have more than one poem about blue. You've got a lot of blue in your poems, but the one for Vincent van Gogh, of course. And then Diane, you had a green poem, the Thorndon Park. So I thought that was great that we had that juxtaposition. And I don't know if you want to say anything more about that, but I certainly, Yeah, I think it would be really fun to have. Actually, now I'm thinking about it, a poem where each one of you writes a line in it, that may be focused on a color. But is there anything more you might want to say about color in those two poems, and how you might relate those to each one of your poems to the other? Those two, Thorndon Park and the Blue poem.
Mary Kay, you're first.
Maybe not the greatest question. So
No, it's a good question. I have something to say about it, but I'm still.
Go ahead, you start, Diane. You go
Okay.
ahead.
Well, the green poem, I don't know. It's like Thornton Park to me was a real sacred place on the campus of Syracuse University. It was actually just to one side of the campus, but it was that place that we went for the magic. And I was thinking about how people that are younger, they have no relationship skills. They get involved with people, they toss them off, they break people's hearts and don't even know it. So they're using the green, kind of as young. But then there was like the greenhouse. And I feel like if you've got a narrative poem, which that is, and then there's something, I wanted the green to be sort of like a river running through it to unify the poem imagistically and structurally. And it's not like I tried to do it. It all came from the magic place. But the thing is, it's like when I'm writing a poem and something comes like that, my mind is very non-linear when I write, but I know what to do with the gifts that I've been given when it comes from the magic place.
wow.
I think I don't know. I think of the color comes out of the experience, whatever it is I'm writing about. It's just there. It's part of the discovery.
Mm.
And I think I wanted to answer because Juan asked me a question here. How do you find the spirit of the poem, especially when it's a shy one? And I think that's a great question. And I'm not saying I can answer it. But I do, I think it's a really important one, and all I can say is it just seems like, it go deeper, but also I think you can find the spirit through reading, or inspiration comes in so many different ways. I think just being once you find this poem that you want to write, once you discover it then you kind of walk around with it, and then you can discover more by just sort of the things that happen that kind of feed into your, uncovering the poem. That's kind of how I see it anyway, that once I have something in my head that I'm working on, things will come from all over,
Yeah.
to help think about that and discover more. Yeah. I have to tell you, like last night I went to a concert in Santa Barbara, and it was like a peak experience kind of concert. It was Emmanuel Axe, Yo-Yo Ma, and Leonidas, Kavakis, who I've never heard before, a violinist. It was like, it was just, and the ending, the same thing happened. They had it, take Beethoven symphony, like this was the fourth symphony, and it's created then for a trio. And so there's all this power of the Beethoven symphony distilled into these three instruments. And so it was very beautiful. It was incredibly beautiful. And it got to the end, and it was kind of a soft and like a little caesura before the end. And you could tell that there was more, but everybody started clapping.
Oh.
And they stopped. Yo-Yo Ma just stopped and went like this to the audience.
Oh,
And
wow.
stop it. So they could do their big ending, without people clapping, because the ending was really powerful. So that's a real thing that Diane was talking about. But
Wow.
anyway, I know I would write a poem about that experience from that concert, because of the thing that struck me so much was all three of them are they're so physical in their playing, and so that it's the body, the way the body makes music, that's going to be the poem. So it's in there now, from that experience, because it did just kind of blow me away. It was such a beautiful concert.
Oh.
And now I'll walk around with that for a while, and little things.
Oh, how beautiful. That's so beautiful. I'm gonna read my poem to finish us up, because I see the time, and yeah, so Juan says, please write how to become a spirit poem reader. I need that book. Thank you for that, Juan. Yeah, so the poem being in your body before you as you're thinking about what you want to write about. That's so beautiful. Thank you for that. So here's my poem, and it is dedicated to Perry Longo, with a lot of love. It's called Still Standing. And it comes out of an experience I had in a museum in Sacramento. And the poem will tell its story. Still standing. I went to bed with words germinating, climbing in and out of each breath, and woke up in a metaphor about you. I must have written this in my sleep, and now it's going to appear on a page, vivid as the vermilion vase I saw at the Crocker Museum on my weekend in Sacramento. I was visiting with two poetry darlings of mine, and we said, let's find something to write about. Isn't everything something to write about? I got caught up with a vase so big, with its beautiful ceramic belly all etched with a queen of the night cactus flower, the kind that blooms only in the dark and dies that next morning. You would have liked it also, I think. Maybe it's the paradox to capture a thing so fleeting and carve it into a red eternity. I went to a garden in my mind where these flowers were spewing their voluptuous scents, and I watched transfixed in the moonlight as they slipped away. Here I am, back to this precious withering, houses burned, lost love shaking down the rooms of a body's house. And here we are, you and I, survivors, old mountains, fir trees of love. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Phyllis. I'm so honored to be in such a poem with that face. And
Well, you're.
I mean, I'm wondering if I thought it was going to be about when you asked how I was after I fell. I think I sent you a quick email and said, I'm still standing.
Yeah, I think that might have been after I wrote this poem, actually. Yeah, so like I had already gotten that. Yeah.
Isn't it amazing? All of these incredible artifacts we're left with. Still standing way beyond any of us.
Still standing, right? Yeah. Well, and thank you. I just want to thank everybody so much. This has been just a really wonderful reading. So many great questions, so much connection, so many people here. So please come back for the next one, and take care, everybody. Be well, be safe, and keep writing.